welcome everyone, and thank you so much for taking out time and joining this session. My name is Sabita Agarwal, and I am part of Team Adrish. Most of you who have joined here must be aware about Adrish, so I need not say much. Just to summarize, Adrish is India's first zero waste organic brand, which provides you, a healthy lifestyle options, like everything to lead a very healthy and holistic lifestyle without harming our mother nature. So that's the whole idea about Adresh. And today we are covering topic like lifestyle is medicine. So how can we make our lifestyle as our medicine? For that we have our guest today, Dr. Abhay Talwalkar. He is a very senior homeopath in Pune with more than 25 years of experience, and his specialization is into women's health. So thank you, Abhay sir, for joining in. And we
Yes,
have,
good evening and thank you very much.
yes sir,
Yeah.
and we have dietitian and nutritionist Prachi Rege. She has more than 18 years of experience, and she has her global clients who has been diagnosed by her or like treated by her holistically in different ways, and we have very good results from that, and we have a lot of matrimonial on that as well. So thank you, Prachi, for joining in. So,
Thank you
and
so much, Sabita.
all of you, thanks for joining in. You all can keep sending your questions, if any, in the chat window, which we will be taking it at the later stage of the session. So we will start with Abhay sir, a few questions which we have in mind. So we'll start with that. Meanwhile, you all can send in your questions. Okay. So, Abhay sir, we first want to talk about, like, when we say lifestyle is a medicine. So, what exactly we mean by that, and how do you define that?
Yeah, so good evening, all, and thank you for being here on a Sunday evening and investing this time. And I'm sure that at the end of this session, you'll really feel that you have not wasted a Sunday evening. So, Savita, before we go ahead and talk about lifestyle as medicine and things like that, we need to really understand first that what do we mean by health? What is it that how can we define health? So if you go back and see the World Health Organization's definition of health is a state of well-being. You can check that on maybe on Google. But frankly speaking, that definition is very short, because ideally what we are talking about now is that health is a dynamic state of being in balance with your the balance between your energy and the cosmic energy. What we all need to understand is that we are made of thousands of cells, and each of this cell is striving to keep you alive and to keep you better, and constantly it is going on. So this energy that is there in our body, which is governing every cell and keeping us healthy, needs to be in balance with the energy of the cosmos. And this is best explained only by a Sanskrit word, which is swasthya. So this swasthya, that is what we need to achieve. And to achieve this, there are multiple options that we have. There are multiple systems that we have through which we can achieve this. But the first thing is that we need to understand that we are a bundle of cells governed by this energy, and this energy needs to be aligned with the cosmic energy. And then you can use multiple options. And nowadays we are seeing that a lot of things that we are eating, the way in which uh, we are experiencing the stress in our day-to-day lives, all these things matter a lot. So going ahead, I will surely answer a few questions on that, but let's concentrate on achieving this alignment or this balance between our energy and the universal energy, and then we have surely achieved what we can say as holistic health.
Okay, so thank you, sir. So going further, I would like to ask you that how do homeopath define health? So when it
No, so
comes to
as I
health, what is the like? How do you say like homeopath helps in it?
no. So as I said, the concept of health in homeopathy is what I just talked about. That we are a bundle of cells, and we are governed with energy, which we call as vital force, or in Ayurveda it is known as prana. So when your vital force is healthy, when this energy that is governing you is is in sync with the universal energy, and it is flowing through all your cells in a harmonious manner, that's the time we say that you're healthy. Okay, the moment this flow of energy gets disturbed, we start developing certain symptoms, and these signs and symptoms, the expressions of these signs and symptoms in our body, we can pick up those and we can treat them. But deep down we have to concentrate on what is the root cause that has caused this whole disturbance, and we have to try and identify this root cause and treat it. That is the major difference between homeopathy and the other systems of healing. So we try and identify what is the root cause of your illness, and we try to go there and we try to address it through the medicines which are specially prepared and specially and dispensed in a specific manner in homeopathy. So that is how we look at homeopathy, look at disease, and that is how we treat it holistically through homeopathy.
Okay. So going further, there is one second. There are few more viewers who want to join in. Yeah. So we have always seen, sir, and I have also seen a lot of people around who does not believe in homeopath, or there's always a silent war going on between homeopath and Ayurveda and allopath. So what do you say about that? Like, what are the basis of remedies, on which basis the remedies are given in homeopath, and are there any side effect of homeopath? So how do you explain that?
Yes, so that is a very good and very relevant question that you've asked. But what I would like to say is about this word war. So nowadays, because of media and because of social media and so much of things that are happening around us, everything is a war. A war against COVID, fine, war against everything. But we have to understand that we need not be at a war, and homeopathy and allopathy and ayurveda are not at all at war with each other. These are concepts that probably media uses to just try and show that there are a lot of differences and all that. But ultimate aim of all the sciences, maybe homeopathy, maybe ayurveda, maybe allopathy, the ultimate aim is to give relief to the person. Okay, so how we do it in all the three branches of healing is different. The basic concepts are different, and rather homeopathy is more sort of holistic because it considers all the emotional aspects, all the physical aspects, all the environmental aspects, everything together when we are trying to consider and give some medicine or give some relief to the patient. On the other hand, of course, allopathy has its all these systems, each one of them have their advantages and have their disadvantages. So when there are probably life threatening situations, if somebody needs a ventilator, he needs a ventilator. We cannot deny about that. And during that time also, we can give them homeopathic remedies along with whatever is going on, so that we can wean him off the ventilator, or we can control the infection very quickly. So I think the basic aim that we all as doctors should have is to use whatever is best in our mode of healing to try and help people. That should be our prime idea. Now the second part of the question that you asked is that a lot of people don't believe, and then are there any side effects? So there are multiple things that you have asked in this question. So let me address them one at a time. So a lot of people don't believe. Yes, there are a lot of people who don't believe in allopathy also. There are a lot of people who don't believe in ayurveda also. So what basically will suit you or your personality or your body makeup. That is what you should take, and we see a lot of cases where they have previously taken maybe Ayurvedic medication, and then they are not well, so they come to us. Or on the other hand, they are scared of the side effects of allopathy, so they come to us. Basically, why homeopathy is more safer is because in homeopathy, the medicines that are prepared on natural substance from natural substances that have existed around us for millions of years. So the plants, the minerals, the animal extracts, etc., are used. Now they are prepared in a particular way which we call as potentization. So we take the original substance and dilute it 1,000 times just to utilize the energy of the substance. So actually we are not using the substance as such, but the energy that the substance has. So as I told you previously also, that we all are governed by energy and we all vibrate at a certain energy. So this energy that is vibrating at a certain frequency makes me who I am. Similarly, we use this energy for healing. So when you are vibrating at a different energy, you are diseased. So we try to identify what has caused this, and we try to identify a similar energy pattern and give it to you through the homeopathic remedy. As I said, it's prepared in such a way that it is serially diluted. It is natural. It has been around you for thousands of years. So the chances of having any adverse reactions or adverse effects with homeopathy are very, very, very less. In fact, these medicines I've been using for past more than 25 years of my practice. I've been using them in pregnant women, children, old age people. In fact, I've been doing a lot of work with homeopathic remedies for pain management during labor and childbirth and so many other things. They work wonderfully well. Yes, so I think that is, does it answer your question, Savita?
Yes, sir. Most of it. Yes. Thank you for that, sir. So, sir, very general question. I think everybody would like to know that when it comes to lifestyle. So, for a very disease-free body, like what are few key points one need to always remember?
Yeah, so again, these few points that I'm going to tell you about, thousands of years, since thousands of years, we have been knowing it. Thousands of years, our scriptures have been writing about it. We are the first people to give yoga to the world. So Patanjali has been writing about the Yoga Sutras, and so many beautiful texts are available. And what all of these says, even if you go back and see all these scriptures that we have, the Bhagavad Gita, the Das Bodh, so many of them will talk about how you should behave, how you should talk, what is very important in food, how you should eat food. So basically, these three or four things: the amount of food that you eat, the quality and quantity of food that you eat. That is one which is very, very important. The second thing is the amount of physical activity or exercise that you do. Again, that is a very important fact. The amount of sleep and the quality of sleep that you get. This is also very important because in sleep, a lot of repair works happen in our body. And fourth and very important is your emotional status, because we as individuals always respond to the environment around us, and the environment around us not only means the geographic location in which we are living, but also the people around us, your father-in-law, your mother-in-law, your husband, wife, whoever. All these things form your environment, and dealing with them on a day-to-day basis can be stressful, because they have their own aspirations, they have their own personality. They are dealing with their problems in their way. So when we live together, it's bound to happen that there can be some stressful situations in life. But how well you handle this stressful situation, all these four things that I talked about, how well you can handle all these four things will determine how healthy and happy and contented you will be.
So that really helps. It helps in, all the aspect of life, I believe. So the next question would be post COVID, especially now, like in this COVID. So we have experienced. Most of us have been experiencing this. That lot of doctors, especially allopathic doctor and all. So you go for any kind of medication and treatment, they never say like about the dietary importance or a dietary habit importance. So, do you think now post COVID, doctors from all the field they will start giving more importance to the dietary habit in continuation with the treatment, whatever is going on?
So, Sabita, I think let's forget about the doctors. We as individual people, after all, doctors are humans, right? So, uh, whether doctors recommend or whether they don't recommend or all that will all depend on their awareness. But what I feel is, in general, we should have, as a community, we have a responsibility towards the fellow citizens. So, whatever you're doing at Adrish, also that entire movement, what does it talk about? It talks about eating healthy food, eating organic food, and eating food that is really very clean. So it is very important. You don't have to have a doctor wanting to tell you, and you don't have to wait for a COVID to arrive. But if you really want to be healthy and happy, and if you want to lead a peaceful life, uh, eating food which is good, which is clean, is very, very important in the first place. Secondly, if you are having any kind of morbidities, like suppose you are having diabetes, you are having hypertension, whatever, in those scenarios, and in general also, it all depends on what you want to be. So tomorrow, if you want to become a sports person, so at that time, your requirement, your energy requirements will be different, your protein requirements will be different, carbohydrate requirements will be different. So all these things have been now studied extensively, and there are wonderful people who are doing good work. Prachi is one of them. So they know what kind of food, what quantity of food needs to be eaten, when, how, all these things. So I think every individual should have a baseline plan which he or she follows. And if their requirements differ according to whatever they are doing, or according to the problems that they are suffering, or the goals that they want to achieve, they should surely consider and consult a nutritionist. That's for sure. You don't have to wait for a doctor to tell you that. This is a simple thing that you have to follow for your own good.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And that is where our nutritionist and dietitian Prachi Rege comes into picture. So then we'll start asking some expert advices from her as well. So hi Prachi, we'll
Hi.
start a few questions. So first thing which I want to ask you is like, do you think there is a link between organic food and a very strong immunity? And do we have any evidence which can base like database on this basis? So how do you explain that?
Okay, so what I believe, see, whatever is good for our planet is good for our health, right? And we know that organic food or natural farming, the improvement in the soil quality and things like that. So definitely there are some plus points when we are farming naturally versus when we are farming conventionally, isn't it? So whatever is, good for our mother nature is definitely going to be good for us. And talking about immunity, there are studies. We have enough data to say that, of course, whenever we minimize the, if we are going to minimize the toxin load, in the form of whatever, it can be a cleaning agent, or it can be a insecticide, or any kind of chemical that is used in the farming process. So lesser the toxin load, of course, good health, greater immunity. So there is definitely a link with that. And of course, the naturally grown and organic food will have greater percentage of phytochemicals, antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, etc., as compared to the food that is grown with a lot of synthetic chemical agents, right? So, and the equation is pretty simple. So higher the vitamin and the mineral content, greater the immunity. So then definitely there is a link. And in fact, in today's one of the newspaper only, I think the Tribune, there was a news that there is a very, very high demand for the organic food. In the COVID days, people are thinking that, they are going to boost their immunity like anything only if they switch to organic food. So I think, this is really good, and we should be eating what is good for the health and what is good for our planet. So definitely there is a link between organic food and stronger immunity for sure.
Okay, thank you, Prachi, for that. So, secondly, I would like to ask you that in India, our staple is wheat and rice, and I think everybody would agree that our all food habits are very dominant with wheat and rice. So,
Yeah.
do we really need to be more diversify in terms of adding more variety of grains in our food, daily food habit, and why so?
So people are actually, even right now in COVID situation, people are getting worried about zinc content, zinc intake and things like that. And now they're talking about whole grains and, kind of eating more variety of grains. But even in the non-COVID days, always, my whole focus was on always how you should be actually diversifying your grains and not dominating only wheat or only rice. And even if you are eating wheat or rice, we really need to look at the varieties that we are adding, of wheat and rice, because people just get comfortable with one variety of kolam or, something like that they are always been eating since childhood, and they will stick to that grain forever. So we should not be really doing that, for a reason that, number one, every grain comes with its own goodness. It has a different nutrition profile. So you take wheat and you take rajgira, one would be devoid of one essential amino acid. Rajgira is full of all 9 essential amino acids, including lysine. So there are certain grains or pseudo grains, what we call, for example, Rajgira, quinoa, they come into the pseudo cereals, and they would have all the essential nutrients. So every grain will have different nutrient profile, and that is why we need to incorporate them so that we get all the nutrients abundantly. And other important point is that whole grains are also rich in certain anti-nutrients like phytates and lectins and gluten and oxalates and things like that. So when we are dominating in just one particular grain, we are going to expose ourselves to that percentage of anti-nutrient drastically, you see. So for example, wheat, for example, it is having, say, high gluten, and taking gluten, just dominating too much of gluten, we know there are several studies that may have some interference with our absorption, with our gut health. It might lead to leaky gut, things like that. It causes inflammation. It is an acidic grain, and that is why we need to change the grains and diversify. So we really, this is not just from the COVID or the immunity point of view, but it is a necessity. We really need to expand our horizons when it comes to grains, is what I feel. And it is such a wonderful, I mean, you can really incorporate them into so many different types, and India is blessed with different varieties of grains, and we really need them back on our plates. And we have place like Adrish, we are so fortunate that we have an access to so many different local varieties of millets and grains and things like that. So we need to bring them back.
Okay, so when it comes to that, what are the few, or maybe top 5 grains you would like to advise to pick up maybe from Adrish?
Okay, so what I see, my whole kitchen, that it's of Adrish. So what I usually do is that, millets mainly. So I like to incorporate the barnyard millet, which is just sama chawal. There is rajgira, then there is red rice that you have. I just made idlis yesterday with that. It is full of iron and zinc. See, when you see the colors on the grain, that indicates that they are nutritionally dense, right? So when you see the red color, you just connect that with iron. And all the grains, whole grains, would be a rich source of zinc. So the millets that we have, the Ajara Ghansal, which just comes from very, very close, Konkan region. So it is very local to us, and we have that in the store. So please make use of these local varieties and bring them on your plates.
Yes. So as much as I know, there are, I think, more than 65,000 varieties of grains available in India. So guys, please go ahead and
Yeah.
use them all. Means I'm sure we cannot use them all, but then try to keep on adding at least one grain every week. So I think that would also help, right, Prachi?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay. So, okay, we'll move further. We have heard a lot about, a sustainable diet. So,
Mhm.
what exactly is a sustainable diet and how it will
Hmm.
help us in the long run to be a healthy, to keep a healthy body?
Yeah, so basically, when we refer to sustainable diet, we are talking about a diet that has a lower environmental impact and it will have a greater food and nutritional security, right, in future, and also to the healthy lives of our present and future generations. So that's what we mean by sustainable. So in layman's term, when we, talk about sustainability, what we really need to do is that going local and seasonal, that is good for our economy, for our ecology. So go for the local food mainly. Yeah, then there is also, that I always talk about, eat less but better, because when we are talking about sustainability, there is no point in wasting our food. So use our resources carefully, don't waste the food, and don't over consume things too much. There is a lot of overeating that is going on these days, and people are eating much more than what is actually required by the body. So that is not needed at all. So sustainability equals moderation. And also, one important point is that when there is a lot of thing happening about sustainable diets and things like that, and there is a lot of data that is saying that going plant based, because that has a lesser carbon footprint, is going to be the next era. So we really need to balance our, this is not a, I don't want to promote veganism here or vegetarianism here, but what I'm trying to say is that we need to make that fair balance between our animal proteins versus plant proteins, because certainly, plant based diet will have more of phytochemicals, more of antioxidants, more of vitamins and minerals, versus versus animal protein, which gives us mainly the proteins or the maximum, iron or B12, right? So apart from that, what antioxidants and phytochemicals that we are actually wanting in today's situation to fight against the diseases are going to come from plant-based foods. And that is why, going plant-based is more on that sustainable part, right? So that's what I mean by sustainable diet.
Okay. So now a lot of people have, and they were actually already doing, but now they all of have suddenly started taking a lot of supplements.
Hmm.
So, what do you suggest? Like, if we compare dietary supplements versus a real or a good food, what is your
Hmm.
recommendation? So, does our day-to-day food can give us all the supplement, or does like
Hmm.
one person need to take dietary supplement all the time? What do you suggest?
Hmm. So there is this whole lot of pharma or nutraceutical industry waiting to give you that range of different dietary supplements. This is good. This is going to prevent you from COVID. This is going to boost your immunity. So, it's that marketing is definitely going to confuse us big time. And when we talk about supplements, it is definitely not different. The rules are not different from COVID days to non-COVID days. There are certain supplements which we have to take, which doesn't come from our food. For example, vitamin D, right? We don't have foods in India, but like fortified foods in India, which will give us vitamin D in abundance, because it's an epidemic deficiency these days. So for that, supplement is an answer. Or for example, B12 for that matter, because it is produced by the bacteria, and mainly it is in the animal products it is found. I mean, a rich source of B12 would be from animal sources. So if you are a pure vegan or a vegetarian, we might have to take help of supplement if the levels are low from a very, very long time, right? But getting obsessed over supplements and thinking that, oh, I take my omega-3 for anti-inflammatory benefits, I take my B12 today, then I take my multivitamin today, then I take my calcium. So people are actually obsessed over supplements, which is absolutely not required. If your diet is comprised of essential nutrients, it has all the food groups and if you are adding that variety, as I said, different variety of local and seasonal foods, not just the grains but the vegetables and the fruits and the seeds and the nuts, we really do not need to be paranoid about getting those nutrients. Because see, these micro minerals and micronutrients that we talk about, they are required by the body in a smaller quantities. So if you're going to eat well throughout the day, you really don't need a supplement. But again, there are people who would you will not be able to meet their requirement because of whatever medical ailments or some other problems and things like that, or their goals are different. Like Abhay sir said, if it's a sports person, then the demand is so high for the, or a pregnant lady, the demand is very high, we are not able to meet that through only food. Yeah, so in that case, supplements play a role. But for people like you and me, I don't think we need to pop in pills every day. Yeah.
So like unless we have a specific need of the body, we really don't need to depend on the supplement dietaries. Like these are dietary supplements, correct? This is what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that is the reason at Adrish we say that your food should be your medicine.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. I agree.
So, okay. So what would be your best 5 pick, maybe from Adrish for immunity boosting?
Oh, okay. All right. So extra virgin coconut oil. Okay. Then moringa. We have very good quality moringa that we can use. Of course, the millets that we spoke about. Giloy. You have excellent giloy powder as well, and it has some. It's an immune modulator, so we can have that. And Salem haldi. That it just comes quickly to my mind. Salem haldi should be number one actually. So that has more than, and people are talking about only haldi water these days, right? So what quality of haldi that we are having, it's very important. So Adrish has a very good variety of more than 5% of curcumin is what we need, and of course with a pinch of black pepper, which also they have in the powder form.
Okay. So that is it with our experts. We will now take few questions of our viewers. I have some questions already sent in, so I'll just ask them one by one. The first one, what we have is somebody is asking about the hemp oil. Her name is Gaurangi Shaha. I am not sure if she is there at the call, but we would still answer the question. So she is asking that I would like to ask about why hemp oil and the powder has become so popular, and why.
Okay. So I think hemp. We shouldn't confuse hemp with the bhang or the ganja, which is cannabis. Yeah, they are both different. They come from the same family, but they are cousins. So the marijuana or the the cannabis that we are talking about, it is will have that has a mind altering properties. But hemp plant would basically it has a lot of it grows quickly. It doesn't need much water. It grows like weed naturally, and I think that is why government I had read in the past that the Indian government had given some to grow hemp plants in Uttarakhand. I think the research, the study, or sorry, the news was in 2017 or 2018, very recent. So they started giving importance to that plant because there was a huge market for in the textile industry for hemp fibers, and that is why they started growing hemp in India and started giving importance to that. Because it is grown without much efforts, and it has a lot of it is economically very beneficial. And so they must have started studying the profile of hemp seeds and the oils and things like that. So when you compare the omega-3 and omega-6 ratio and things like that, hemp seed would have a very good omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Okay, and then of course the oil also is used in a lot of PMS and menopausal anti-inflammatory benefits and things like that. So hemp, hulled hemp seed, it is also used by many vegans these days in the form of hemp milk. So it's a very good protein source as well. I use my hemp seeds in chutneys and podis, like dry chutney powders, along with the flax and the pumpkin and the sunflower seeds. So it is really, really a very good source of essential fatty acids. It is extremely rich source rather for vegetarians to have their omega-3s from that. So you can mix all the seeds and make a dry chutney powder as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I see Gaurangi is there on the call. So I hope Gaurangi, your question is answered. And thank you, Prachi, for that. We have a second question from Anjali Singh. I hope Anjali Singh is also there on the call. So
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, good. So
Yes, I'm there. Yeah.
okay. So I'll just ask your question. She's asking to lower high HbA1c. It helps. Is it helpful to switch to protein diet?
Okay, all right. Okay, so so HbA1c, as we know, that it is a 3-month average, study to check how the glucose levels are going up and down in our body, right? So if the HbA1c is, of course, if you're into that diabetic range, now see, one diet doesn't fit all. Like some people might get benefited over going on just the protein diet. People are doing Dikshit diets, people are doing intermittent fasting, and they are getting results and things like that. So it is very individualistic. Like if I get an HbA1c who's a diabetic, and he's also, we see in their blood parameters that he's also having hyperlipidemia, for example, high cholesterol, low HDL. So for such people, I will definitely not give high protein diet. And if we are talking about, giving them animal protein in the form of, chicken and eggs, and giving that kind of protein to control their glucose is definitely not the right way, because that will have its own side effects little later, as in high uric acid, or as in, inflammatory effects and things like that. So I think having that balance is important. So what we can do ideally, because when we are skipping one particular food group completely, for example, we are taking away the carbs completely or minimizing it to a drastic level and adding proteins for energy, we are going to have some side effects little later. Yeah, so it is important to balance your good low glycemic index and low glycemic load complex carbohydrates along with the right amount of proteins. For example, for every 45 grams, like there are calculations, how much protein do we add, against how many grams of carbs. So when that combination is taken along with other low glycemic foods, your blood sugar is absolutely, you get very good results with that. And going, there are studies, in fact, there is a study on HbA1c and protein diet, that they find that the fasting level doesn't change much. There is not much difference in the fasting, and even the lipid profile gets bad little later by switching to high protein diets. So I think have that fair balance is what I feel.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So, I think your question is answered, Miss Anjali.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you very much.
So we'll just move on to the next question. There is one question. I'm not sure if it is about for me or for you. I'll just read it out. How
Okay.
authentic are the organic vegetables sold in market? And that could be for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Certificates
Please
from
answer.
government agencies can be bought. That is perfectly right. You are right, sir, on that. And are there any reliable manufacturers of probiotic in India with a wide range of bacteria? So, Prachi, I would request you to answer that.
Okay. So, so coming to probiotics, there are various different strains of probiotics that we are referring to, right? And we need all of them. We need those Bifidobacterium, we need Lactobacillus. There are different strains. So every food will have its own different strain culture and the percentage of that strain and things like that. So instead of, again, getting used to buying something that is packaged, or something that comes in a bottle or a Tetra Pak, there are several different home probiotics that we can make. For example, idli and dosa batter, as simple as that. Yeah, so, or maybe our pickles which are made in the right manner. Yeah, or it could be yogurt, it could be yogurts and dahi or even simple rice kanji, which is kept overnight, rice that we keep overnight. And every region has its own different probiotics. Yeah, for example, in Maharashtra, we make something like ragi ambir. We keep the ragi in ragi, sprouted ragi flour in buttermilk. We soak that overnight, and then we give tadka on top in the morning. So these are some great ancient ways of adding probiotics in the diet. But kombucha and all these drinks that we have, basically they also have very good strains. So instead of drinking some fruit juices and don't want to take the brand names, but or a chas that comes in a plastic this and things like that, it is better to have kombucha when you feel like having, drinking something when you're out. But otherwise, stick to home sources, like homemade sources of probiotics and prebiotics.
Yeah. So, okay,
Yeah, is
maybe
that
the
okay?
first question I will answer. So,
Okay, yeah, about the vegetables.
so,
Sorry.
so actually there are, authentic organic is available, but you will have to make sure the source of it, and, where are you buying from, and the identification of that, which is very important. A lot of people go only by the look or by the name or by the cost of it. So it is not always true. So there are few things in name of organic. There is something called residue free. So if sometime you buy a organic pack of fruit or something, but you will see on the box this something written is residue free. So I'll just say that what is residue free. Residue free is something, it has a chemical, it has a pesticide, but then every pesticide has its life. So some will have a week's life, some will have 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So when you spray those pesticides, those chemical, and then you cross that the time period, which is, if for example you will have 2 weeks time period. So if you have sprayed the pesticide and then plucked or harvested that particular vegetable after a 2 week of period, so that is called as residue free, because the effect of that pesticide has subsided from that particular vegetable. But that does not mean that it is organic. So when we call it organic, it has to start from the soil. So your soil has to be organic, and for organic plantation, it has to be more than 10 or 15 years of practice where the organic plantation is happening there. Then the soil quality, what is the seed you are sowing in that also has to be indigenous variety. And then what is the manure you are giving in that. After that, what is the kind of sprays you are giving, like for example in palaks and methis and all, we spray buttermilk as a keetnashak, what you say. So if you are following a process which is starting from your soil and the sowing and till the harvest, and how you preserve, so from end to end it has to be completely natural, then it is called organic. There are places where you get them, but then you need to identify them very well. And in Adrish, for sure, whatever we get is 100% organic. So yes, sir, you can sometime try Adrish vegetables also, and you will definitely get to know the difference between the regular vegetable and actual organic vegetable. Okay.
Yes, I was going to say that. Basically, you can find out the difference just by looking at the vegetable instead of going into all these technicalities. Also, the number, the codes that they use, it has to start with 9 or whatever. You just see the vegetable and you understand, there is always life inside that, and it is not same in texture, size and things like that. It gets cooked easily. It has a different flavor altogether. So
don't be scared of insects. If there are insects, that means there is a life in it. Yeah. Okay.
Can I add something to this, Savita? Can I just add something to
Sure,
this?
please.
So basically, again, what comes to my mind is basically because of the way this question was asked. So here I would me myself being a farmer myself. Okay, I know what difficulties our Indian farmers are facing. So so we have to have a responsible community, because if you expect the farmer to produce organic food, there has to be demand for that. you
Yes.
know, and there has to be a link between the producer and someone like you who could get it to the people who demand from them, you know. So that is very, very important. You cannot just sit at home in a plush air conditioned room and demand organic food. You've got to support your farmer also for that, you know. I think that is one link that we are often missing. And just because the farmers also, they know that, you know, just by labeling something organic they can get extra money. There may be people who are doing like this, but it takes a lot of effort, lots and lots of uh, money to really get all these certifications right. And like you said, you know, for 10 to 12 years for a farmer to improve the soil, etc., etc. And at the end of it, if he finds that his produce is not fetching him money, then what he's going to do is end up growing sugarcane, you know, which requires less efforts and it fetches him money at a certain amount of time. So I think as citizens, we should uh, join a sort of a movement where we assure our farmers that we will buy good quality stuff from you, and we should encourage these farmers. That is what I feel, because unless we do that, we are not going to get healthy food to eat, and we are just going the American way. Sorry for using that expression, but that is what is happening. We are trying to just copy whatever goes on in the Western world and just buy boxes of things and imagine that eating that would make us healthy. That's not what will happen. Okay.
That is very true, sir.
That's,
We have to actually, like, we also face this kind of problem, and we have to keep our, farmers motivated to continually, do this work, because a lot of time it happens that, they get very discouraged to do this because the kind of money they get. And so as a team, as a whole, we have to encourage our, farmers to keep on doing this
yes.
organic farming.
And I see generally what happens is that people don't want to buy organic because it is expensive as compared to the other food, you know. So that is another thing which, so people need to understand how much efforts go into producing something that is organic, you know.
Yes.
So I think that is very, very
And in
important.
long term, sir, it actually saves a lot of money.
Yes.
You don't have to take, as Prachi said, you don't have to take any supplements. You don't have to run to the doctor for any kind of, disease and all. So it really saves money in long term. Okay, so we'll quickly move on to a few more questions which our viewers have sent in the chat box. I'll just read it. My 10-year-old sometimes complains of a dull tummy ache above belly button for a couple of days. Not excruciating, but a constant dull ache. This is especially happening recently. Any home remedies? My 6-year-old has dandruff. I apply neem oil sometimes. Any remedies, as in what to eat, what to avoid for dandruff? This question has come from Neeta. Neeta, are you there? Yeah, okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
You want to just say something, and then maybe with the food
Yeah,
related
Neeta, you
thing,
want to explain your problem to our experts?
So
Yeah,
what
sure.
I
Thank you so much.
think is, what I think is this problem needs to be addressed, in the sense we need to really find out what's going on behind all this. So because children can have a small tummy ache because of what kind of food they are eating, when they are eating, or it could be just worms, or there could be multiple things in this, you know. There are sometimes we experience that children, if they don't want to do a particular kind of thing given to them, let's say homework given to them, and the child doesn't want to do it, that time also it can be an excuse that mom, my tummy is paining. So multiple things can be a possibility here. So I think we need to rule out certain things. And of course, about home remedies, I think Prachi would be the right person to talk about talk about this. But
okay,
we
so yeah.
try and find out if there's something seriously wrong. Yeah, Prachi.
Yeah. So basically, so what you can try is, just observe that if eliminating certain foods, for example, dairy or wheat from his diet completely, is taking away his, dull ache that you are referring to. So number one is that, see if he's intolerant to certain foods, or if a particular food when he takes that is causing this kind of dull ache. So maintain a food diary and see if you can analyze, like what exactly is happening. Other thing is, for simple colicky kind of pain, nutmeg is a very good home remedy that you can do. So whenever there is diarrhea or colicky pain, what we do is that we mix nutmeg, like say 1 tablespoon nutmeg powder with 1 tablespoon of sunt, which is dry ginger powder, and you mix that with pinch of hing, jaggery, and ghee, and you make small candies, which is very it's very sweet also in taste, and kid can usually easily eat it. So you just give him one candy, and nutmeg helps to take away the colicky pain, and suntha, which is dry ginger, helps to take away the bloating and the gas problem if there is any. Yeah. And I think his dandruff could be related to his gut issues, so we really need to see what the problem is, as sir said. If the diagnosis is done correctly, we will be able to help you better, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. So next question is from Anagha. Anagha, are you there? She is asking, extra virgin oil have low smoking point. So can we, use them in cooking?
No. So whichever oils have low smoking points, like usually extra virgin oils, we cannot use it in Indian cooking for sure. So what you can do is that, you can dap them on your rotis or bhakris, just apply how we apply ghee. You can just apply them on top of that, or you can simply add them to your salad dressing. So these are two ways which it can incorporate extra virgin oils. Like if it is an extra virgin coconut oil, it will still be little stable for cooking, but not others like olive oil or flax oil and things like walnut oil. All these are very very delicate oils, and we cannot be doing our even olive oil for that matter. People think that I'm using olive oil. Wow, they feel that that's the most kind of right oil to use, but it's definitely not meant for Indian cooking. So if you have to use olive oil, you must use only extra virgin olive oil, and that can be used only in your salads. Yeah.
Okay. I have another question regarding oils. For Sabita especially. I was wondering that when it comes to groundnut oil, the price of groundnut oil is around 350-360 rupees per liter. But if you look at the groundnuts, whole groundnuts to buy, for 1 kg you have to pay, I think, 200 something. So to extract 1 liter of oil from groundnuts, you require at least 3 kgs of groundnuts. So my question is, like, how is it possible to price-wise to get groundnut oil for 360 rupees?
Okay. So see, there is a different volume which is used for, oil extraction. You are right there. We would at least need, yes, if it is a good quality groundnut, you would definitely need about 2.5 kg of groundnut to extract 1 liter of oil. But then when it comes to, a retail market of groundnut, what you are buying groundnut at, and, the oil extraction, so the volume and prices, it is actually different. So you cannot compare, because we are not buying or taking groundnut at the same rate what is available at the counter. So at the back end, it is in a large volume, which is we are taking out the oils, and that is where we are able to save that money and give it at 360 rupees. But then if you see, if your question is right, if you see outside, there will be organic groundnut oils which is available for 160 or 180 or 200 rupees, and that is how we explain that so groundnut oil cannot come at the cheaper rate when people come and say that why it is so expensive. So that is one reason why these oils are expensive. But when you compare with the groundnut rates, then yes, that is the volume which plays the major role, and that is where we are able to do in that rate. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. We have our friend Pallavi who is asking, how is ghee useful in weight loss journey? That's an interesting question.
Yes, it is very interesting. So ghee, when we are referring to that, it actually, helps in weight loss, or when Ayurveda refers to ghee as a therapeutic food in treating cholesterol and things like that, we are referring to a very good quality ghee here. Yeah, which is actually coming from the Gir cow milk and things like that. Yeah, so that kind of ghee will have, of course, ghee is also a rich source of saturated fat, but it is that saturation comes from a type of fat called medium chain triglycerides. Yeah, so MCT is what we refer to, and these MCTs are present in coconut oil and ghee. Now what they do is that when you consume that, that kind of fat is not going to get inside, just get inside the body and sit there and do nothing. It just gets quickly utilized for energy. Okay, so the caprylic acid that we refer to, or the lauric acid that we refer to, these are the kind of MCTs which are found in ghee and the coconut oil, and they have a role in fat loss by just getting utilized for energy quickly. And again, when we are talking about ghee or oil or anything, moderation is the key, right? So if you are restricting your amount of oil or ghee taken, we are going to get the weight loss. If you are going to drink ghee like that and say, where is my weight loss, it is not going to happen that way. Yeah,
So Pallavi, hope your question is answered well. We'll just move on to the next question. Our friend Sangeeta is there and she is asking about, how is intermittent fasting helpful for health?
okay, so we are hearing a lot of things about intermittent fasting, and people have actually made that into a particular diet wherein lot of rules are placed, and they are following some numbers like say 16/8 or 12/8 or whatever. So the basic idea of intermittent fasting was, in the ancient days, that we used to finish our dinner before sunset, and people were not eating their next breakfast in the next morning, just after finishing their puja and all rituals, they were breaking their fast as breakfast. So already there was a gap of 12 or 14 or sometimes even 16 hours gap was happening between your last dinner and your next day breakfast, right? So that kind of fasting is what we need to do basically, and not something like you go get up in the morning, you go for a heavy workout, and then you starve yourself till 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and then you start your day with heavy lunch or something like that. So it has to be properly monitored by an expert. If you're going to do intermittent fasting, it has some great benefits. I'm not denying that at all. We see really good changes in the blood parameters and things like that, but it needs to be done correctly and not be seen as from like a fad diet point of view.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have next question from Vanshika. She's asking, what is HMBC? I did not get it.
I think we were talking about HbA1c. She's referring to that. So
Okay, yeah. So I think she just misread it. Okay.
yeah.
So is there any more question anybody would like to ask to our experts?
Somebody is asking Sabita about a ketogenic diet. I think Anagha is asking, what is your opinion on keto diet?
Yes.
So
Yes.
see, when we talk about immunity and going forward, when we are going to focus on immunity and things like that, I don't think it's a very good idea to kindly, stay away completely from the carbs and things like that, because there are no fruits allowed on keto. There are not certain vegetables allowed on keto. And here we are talking about adding variety, making sure that you're having all the antioxidant and the phytochemicals. And then on ketogenic diet, all you're having is a lot of protein and fat, mainly animal based or dairy based, too much of paneer, and these are all inflammation causing foods. So I don't, I come from a old school of thought, and I believe, getting back to the basics is what we need to do, and not doing something that is very new in the market, or that is that is being created as a fad, because keto diets were actually designed for epileptic kids, and now they are using it's become a big fad these days. So I do not definitely recommend any kind of diet that has a name or something that is taking away your entire food group.
And again,
Okay,
something
I
that is
have
sustainable.
another question also. That for underweight people, which kind of diet do you suggest? And if someone is overweight or underweight, should there be a difference in the diet? Because as per as I know, in our body there is a management of weight done by the parts, the organs. So I believe that balanced diet would take our body weight to a correct. So what is your opinion about that?
Okay, ma'am. So see, when we are referring to underweight, people, first we need to look at, first of all, we need to understand what is the reason for, having such low weight, body weight. Okay, then we need to see what if there are any nutritional deficiencies. And from day one, we cannot really put him on 2000 calorie plan or a, very heavy calorically dense diets, right? So we need to make his gut really ready, like digestion really healthy, to take in that much of food and give all the healthy foods to gain that weight. So if we are not, so when we talk about weight gain, we don't want to gain fat, but we want to gain muscles, isn't it? So we are talking
Yes.
about adding good carbs. We are talking about adding good proteins along with good fats, good essential fats. So that is what we are referring to. So there is no a particular diet that will work for underweight or for overweight people. It is about lot of aspects which we Abhay sir talked about. One is the diet or the right foods in right quantities, in right combinations. Then is your exercise. Then comes your sleep, which is very important, even to gain weight and to lose weight as well. And comes your mindfulness technique. So when we look at all these 4 pillars, we are going to achieve the results that we are looking for.
Okay. Thank you.
So we'll
Thank
just
you.
move on to the next question. We have a question, how to complete the daily requirement of protein through veg food, say 55 grams per day without the supplements.
Okay, so I really need to take the diet recall and see what you are eating currently, and how much I need to calculate your proteins. I will not be able to say whether you are taking 55 grams, but usually the protein requirement is around 0.8 grams per kg body weight. So that is a more sufficient protein for all of us. If you are into heavy activity and things like that, we increase that to 1 gram. For an athlete, it will be 1.2, 1.5 grams per kg body weight. So the protein requirement will change according to your goal, basically, and what activity you are into. Yeah. Just loading too much of proteins unnecessarily, and if you're just going for a normal leisure walks every day, that protein is not going to get utilized by the muscle, and it's a calorie. It's going to get converted into fat. So it really depends, on your activity level, on your age, gender, physiological state, medical issue. All of those things are considered when we are calculating the proteins.
Okay, so we don't have the name who asked this question, but whoever it is, you can
Well,
just
I have asked it, ma'am.
That's
My
fine,
name is
sir. Yeah.
Chandrakant Pathare.
So
Hello,
then
sir.
I
Yeah.
can connect you
Hello.
to Prachi
Well,
later on for your detailed diet
Yeah.
plan, which will,
I will. But I have only one sub question in this.
Yeah.
Whether it is possible to complete it with vegetarian diet. You see, 55 to 60
Absolutely.
grams of protein. I'm into exercising.
Okay.
I do weight training and all. But then, is it possible
It is
that
possible, sir. It is absolutely possible to reach
through weight
55
diet,
grams
isn't it?
through
With all
vegetarian
9,
diet.
I mean, with all 9 amino
All
acids and
with
everything.
all essential amino acids. Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
Thank
we
you.
will maybe connect you to Prachi later, and then she can plan.
I will connect you to.
Sure.
I will
Thank
connect
you.
myself. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you very much. Yeah.
yeah, thank you, sir. So we'll just move on. We have our friend Vikas here, and he is asking, what is the best way of cooking food to preserve its nutrients?
I think Sabita, you answered this question really well. I remember your one of your answer in our session. So please go on, and then I will add if required.
Okay. So first thing is again that we have to choose our food rightly, like, what is the raw material we are using. So that is important. So, and going further, how do we cook is like, In which vessel we are cooking, that is also very important. Like we should not use aluminum or non-stick, because even if you're buying a organic food and then cooking it in a aluminum or a non-stick vessel, then half of its nutrients are already gone away. So you have to be very careful about that. And then there are lot of things which you need to add to each other. Like for example, as Prachi said, that you need to add black pepper powder to turmeric. So there are some combination which works very well, and which also increases the nutrient value or preserves the nutrient value of that particular food. So there are few things which we need to look into. And Prachi, what do you want to add into that?
Yeah, so I think, similar, best way of cooking is, of course, not on a very high flame wherein we are exposing our, sabzis and thing, and vitamin C is lost and things like that. Do not just open, when you're cooking the vegetable, do not open the vessel 100 times to see if the vegetable is cooked and things like that. So the minute we are, exposing it, just let it steam, let it cook under its own steam. And the utensils are very important, because if we are eating organic and if we are cooking that in the non-stick, we are nullifying the whole effect of eating organic food, right? So cooking in iron or cooking in heavy duty steel is a very good method. And if you can afford there are certain utensils like really heavy duty steel which has a thermo knob on top, and it just cooks with its own moisture. The food gets cooked with its own moisture inside, so you don't add any water or anything to that. And you don't even have to open the lid. The thermometer on top will just tell you whether food is or the vegetable is cooked. So there are certain ways of cooking that way also. Otherwise, on a low flame in a good utensil, healthy cooking metals that we need to use.
And we have some good earthenwares also available now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And to add to that, cooking always has been a very slow process, So in today's life, we need everything very quick and very fast. But then cooking is always a slow process. When, earlier we used to cook in the chula or these matkas and all, and it used to take long time. So why we introduced today is the cooker. And cooker is, I think even Prachi would agree to me, that it is actually not the best way of cooking. Because what happens, we say cooker is a pressure cooker, means it creates a pressure in the food. And the moment you are creating that pressure in the food grain breaks, and that is where all the nutrients are lost. So you have to see that cooking is actually a slow process. And if we follow that, we will be really able to intake the nutrient of it. Yeah.
And I think to add to that, especially when we have a challenge in cooking our dals and grains, so please try and soak them. Plan your meals in such a way that you're soaking all the whole grains, because that is going to take away all the anti-nutrients that I spoke about. So soaking, sprouting, fermenting, cooking, these methods are going to take away the anti-nutrients. So try to soak so that, you will be able to cook the dals quickly and things like that. You don't have to cook it on a higher flame and things like that.
And I have heard that if you soak it well, you also absorb it well, and you digest it well. So it is always advisable to soak all your grain before you use it. Yeah. So that's the last question we had. Is there anyone else who wants to ask any question? Otherwise, we'll just wrap up this.
Yeah, this is Anagha. I want to ask question regarding earthen pots. So I came across a news article where sometimes making these pots, people use soil which is having certain heavy metals. So while buying those kind of pots, how do we make sure that they are free from those heavy metals?
So you want me to answer, Prachi?
Yes, Sabita, yes, you answer this.
Okay. So yes, Ananda, you are right. There are people will say that it is a earthen pot, but then there will be a lot of chemical in that. There will be a lot of metals in that. So one need to see that, what is the source of it. We get a same pot at the roadside at 400 rupees, and if you take from a renowned place, the same thing will cost 1100 rupees or 1200 rupees. But I am not saying that you have to just go by the price, but then you have to find out what is the source of it, where it is made, whether it is being made using only the traditional mud, what we call that one, and what is the process it is being made through, and how much it is being baked. So any earthenware which has been baked for 10 to 12 years, 10 to 12 hours, that would be the best thing to do. So, and if it is a pure earthenware, it will be very heavy. Just one identification I'm giving you, it will be very heavy when you lift it compared to the regular ones. And moreover, you have to be actually sure about the source of it, where it is coming from and how it is being made. So that's the only thing you can do. One more thing I would like to add to that is that if it is a pure mud, then it will always leak, or it will always seep. If you have a mud bottle and if you fill it and keep it on the table or everywhere anyway, you will see there is some condensation happening outside that. So that is the true identification of original mud pots. So that is one identification which you can look into. Yeah. So is there any other questions anyone has?
Thank you.
Okay. So someone is saying, thanks very much, everyone. Very useful session indeed. Special thanks to Doctor and Adresh. Okay. So everyone, thank you so much for joining in. And thank you, Abhay sir. Thank you, Prachi, for making this.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
And we'll keep on doing such things.
Thank you, everyone.
Keep giving your feedback, and maybe we can pick up some topics and we can talk about that, because we as a team of 3 are always happy to serve people when it comes to a holistic and healthy living. So we are always there at your service, and thank you very much for joining all. Yeah, anyone else? Anyone wants to say anything? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.